Good morning, dear friends. We start the working day in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and I invite Mr. Vadim Chernish, Minister for Temporary Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced Persons, and the topic is results of interdepartmental meeting on Crimea deoccupation. Good morning. I would like to inform you that yesterday in the Cabinet of Ministers, there was the meeting under leadership of First Vice Prime Minister Mr. Kubev, which brought together all the governmental agencies and ministries which are involved into dealing with IDPs and with the residents of occupied territories. The big number of issues which was discussed today, which was discussed yesterday, excuse me, was raised because this was the first meeting devoted to this topic, and we just wanted to cover all those problem issues which have been accumulated during 3 years, and we discussed a broad spectrum of them involving filing of claims to international courts, paying of compensations to IDPs, energy issues, etc. So the Vice Prime Minister allowed to coordinate all the issues and to develop the counteraction strategy. We analyzed what's going on in Crimea by means of integration to Russian Federation, and how we should counteract to this tendency. So what were specific measures which we discussed? Construction of so-called Kerch Bridge. We analyzed the technical issues, we analyzed the real situation, and we discussed coordination between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Justice to counteract this construction. Also, the use of the offshore production capacities of Ukraine. As of now, Russia continues to produce Ukrainian gas in the exclusive maritime area, and this gas is supplied to the occupied peninsula. In line with the constitution of Ukraine, they are using the minerals, subsoil minerals, which belong to the people of Ukraine. The same is true in terms of the bioresources of the Black Sea. Again, these bioresources are the asset of Ukrainian people and property of Ukrainian people. Yesterday also we discussed the such important aspect as the broadcasting in the occupied Crimea. And we discussed the broadcasting in the occupied territories in many aspects, and coordinated this issue with the National Council of Broadcasting. We also discussed the FM broadcasting on Crimean territory, and discussed the threats which exist in relation to the broadcasting from Crimea to Ukrainian territory. Yesterday we also discussed the necessity to create administrative services center for those residents who reside permanently in Crimea and cannot get the necessary governmental services because of the absence of governmental agencies in Crimea. So we have analyzed all the services which would require funding from the state budget, and all the governmental agencies were assigned with the task to design such centers. For example, the issuance of documents and necessary documents, registration of cars, etc. Also, we discussed an important issue of exception to the higher educational institutions, exception of graduates from Crimea to the higher educational institutions in mainland Ukraine, and some political leaders and Ministry of Education contributed many effort into creating conditions, simplified conditions for the school graduates from Crimea, facilitating their entries to Ukrainian universities. But we have simplified the procedure for them, but we have issues with the documents of those students, so this was also discussed. And we also discussed such well-known and well-disputed issues as an attempt to launch the nuclear power reactors which exist in Sevastopol, and in line with MAGATE rules, Ukraine has to supervise and control the nuclear objects. And also we discussed the issue of administrative border between Ukraine and Crimea, and we discussed simplification of the passage procedure via administrative border. Yesterday we did not discuss the issue of rights and freedoms of citizens in the occupied Crimea, because this requires involvement of the slightly different membership of agencies to this council. And in result of such discussion of deficiencies in human rights, we would like to bring Russia to the idea that any violations of human rights may result in criminal cases and criminal claims, and in filing cases to the International Court of Human Rights. Also, we did discussed the issue of the functioning of authorities in immediate neighborhood with the border, administrative border. We plan to establish a department of our agency in Kherson Oblast, and we wish to bring this issue to this center of the attention of our governmental bodies. And one more thing about cultural treasures, about Scythian gold and Ivazovsky pictures and UNESCO monument in Khersonesus. And some monuments which are not UNESCO monuments, which are not included, but they were included to the previous register of UNESCO. So we decided to submit the list of these monuments to the government, to compile it and to submit in order to review the issue comprehensively. Any questions? Please.
Good afternoon, I'm Sevchenko, UCMC. Several questions about entrance examinations to higher educational institutions. There will be some quotas for these people throughout Ukraine or in different universities. So these will be the universities of eastern regions and from Crimea, so there will be a quota, and we also coordinate some issues with the Ministry of Education, and we took a decision, and there is so we simplified the procedure. You know that there is an external testing, and it's very difficult for children who were educated different curricula, and there are some peculiarities, and it's difficult to compete with those who were studied according to curricula that is in the is here. That's why there will be a special order according to the results of respective curricula that the Ministry of Education created as to examination procedures. These people will be accepted to these educational institutions, and next year this issue will be more ready, and not this issue should be a child from Crimea should somehow cross the administrative border. This child should have proper documents. Also, there is an issue of citizenship and the opposition from the side of Russian authorities. Of course, you can find details in the Ministry of Education. There are orders. I do not remember all the orders, but there is a procedure how to verify the knowledge that of these children, and also first attestation, then examination, and then these children can enter higher educational institutions. So there is a procedure that should be respected. The documents should be provided, and we will correct all the gaps. So according to the information of the Ministry of Education, the Russian Federation started to change time frame in the educational process in order to improve the opportunities to counteract the process that Ukraine started. That's why we see that this is a sensitive issue, and if Russian Federation acts this way, it means that we are acting rightly. So you can get the information about the orders from the Ministry of Education, or we also can, they can provide this information, but there is a general quota, and it will be financed from state budget. Also, specifying question: is there a hotline? Yes, at the Ministry of Education and Science, there is such a hotline. We carry out coordination function, but there are ministries who deal with it, and this is an active position of the minister. And, they continue to realize this initiative, and they are very useful. They help to connect with those who live in the territory of the peninsula. They know that Ukraine, that this is not only financing of the first year of study. If the child entered the university, it will continue, the financing will continue till the graduation. Of course, students should follow the curriculum, and we demonstrate that we do not break ties with those citizens. Of course, we should show it in different spheres, not only in many spheres. And we believe that these citizens of Ukraine, they are the citizens of Ukraine, they can use their rights, but we should change a lot in our legislation, because this legislation does not reflect how these norms can be used, taking into account the specificity that this territory is under occupation and there is no Ukrainian power. That's why a lot should be done in order to change legislation, I mean laws, that should be adopted by the Supreme Council of Ukraine, because, of course, the ministries provide their proposals, and we hope that till the next year we will improve the system. One more question about the crossing administrative border. Several weeks ago here in UCMC there were advocates of human rights, and they faced the problem that when for example, a person lost Ukrainian passport, how can they restore these documents, for example, to go through Kerchensk Strait, but this person was considered as a violator of this. So this person, for example, went through the territory of Russia, and how these documents can be restored, and one of the ways is that, for example, they can have two passports, one for mainland Ukraine and other passport. So we carry out always discussions about the depth and the width of the processes. And the questions are, for example, by the media that a person had a problem. So this problem is 1 in 10,000. So and all the focus of the attention of the ministry is placed on these individual issues. This is a rare issue. Loss of passport, this is something extraordinary. We are speaking about the majority of the citizens who have passports, and they can cross the border, and they do it every day in large quantities. Many people cross the border. That's why we spoke about overall issues, not separate individual issues, complaints of people. We were speaking about systemic problems. For example, some center for provision of administrative services at the administrative border. There you can get all the needed administrative services if we take into account proposals that were provided by the ministries, and it will be easy to cross administrative border to get proper services, whether it is a passport or a certificate of birth or some services for car owners. So these are things, systemic things, that we try to solve. And if advocates say that there is a separate instance, we are ready to discuss it with proper specialists and to provide answers. But I don't see a problem here. If, for example, a person cannot cross the border and address the Ukrainian consulate that is in Rostov-on-Don, I can't see violation here. There is one more question. Please introduce yourself first. Smila Gaziv, RT channel. What will be the procedure simplified for crossing the border? So about previous issue, about the order of crossing the border, you know that the service on Crimean issues provided proposals to the document 1035, and this was not coordinated properly. We discussed these issues, and we get the order from the vice premier, and we should verify. So we should also negotiate with NGOs and Majlis and propose to several ministries who didn't coordinate this proposal. So there are two ministries. And then that will be put on the agenda of the government. Strategic issues, always connected with the fact that we have at least two concepts of vision of our relationship with Crimea. And this vision sometimes differs a lot. So what I mean, do we isolate these people? Do we break ties? No, it's not only about Crimea. Do we break ties? Do we block them? So when you say about the issues of economy or the opportunities of people to bring, for example, food product in some number from the territory of Ukraine to Crimea, some people say that we should block this. And when you say about other things, they say, no, you shouldn't block, you should allow. So in our opinion, we should have ties with those who live in Crimea. It should be not only be preserved, it should be deepened, and the opportunity should be provided to get the documents. Russian Federation provide passports to everyone there, and then they use it to defend their citizens who got their passports recently. And if a person, for example, needs to change the photo in the passport, in the Ukrainian passport, so there are no procedures and physical opportunities to do it, and we understand that Russian Federation blocks it because they obstruct this process. And if we cut all the directions and do not provide them with opportunity to come to Ukraine, and do not provide logistics in the controlled territory, a person starts to lose ties with Ukrainian society and starts to go to, for example, Rostov-on-Don, or start to believe that there will be some crossing, and they will integrate in different society and to the different territories, and they will see their development and their education in educational institutions and find work there. So the concept that should be realized, we should understand that we should preserve ties, we should improve the ties with those people. Then people in the occupied territories will see that they are citizens of Ukraine, but they live under occupation now. So, and We should improve the life of a target group that can use this provision or any other provision of the government in order to use the opportunities and preserve ties with the citizens of Ukraine, relatives, friends, other interests. Then the government should help, not only government, but all bodies of power without exception. So the logic is simple. If something thinks differently, so please explain why it should be banned. If a person goes out of Crimea and comes to control territory of Ukraine, why they cannot bring everything that they had? So I don't understand why people cannot do this. If a person moves to Dnipropetrovsk, for example, and they have a lot of obstacles to bring their property, their belongings there, why 50 kilograms? Why not 55 or 35? Thank you, Mr. Minister. We have one more question, and then we will end. UCMC, Natalia, tell us, please. I have a simple question, more to external mechanisms. So I know that there were many requests to your ministry. So how does the ministry function? What departments work at full scale, and what is the communication with other ministries? We heard about the communication with the Ministry of Education. What is other cooperation, and do you provide recommendations, or you have meetings, or you have more preferences in order to establish some work with these institutions? We do not have departments and people except the minister and 3 deputies. So there are no other people in the ministry. All the people who work for the ministry, these are people who work in the agency of renewal of Donbass and partly service of Crimea and Sevastopol city. So this is all resource of ours, and if we take this component, there are people who get their salaries according to old norms, but we have active, powerful civil society and also our international partners. We use best experience and recommendations that were developed by expert community. If we didn't have such an opportunity, and also we get help from our international partners, from UNO and other organizations, and we use bilateral opportunities working with some European governments. Great Britain government provides help, also Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and due to having specialists in different services and departments, we start to realize those recommendations that were discussed previously by the government. What about communication between the ministries? Vice Premier, who is responsible for national security and defense in the government, and also to distribute functional obligations, he held a meeting yesterday, and on Monday they took decision. All materials were prepared. They were gathered from different ministries, and on Wednesday and one day he took all necessary decisions. It means that from gathering data, from holding a meeting and taking the decisions, it all was done in one day. I say that we didn't have such meetings before about separate ministries. So there are ministries and ministers or deputy ministers, and the majority of them understand that this is an important direction of work. That's why yesterday and before this and yesterday separate ministries, they came up and they shared the information before meeting and after meeting in order to take proper decisions. So there is horizontal cooperation, of course, and according to the provisions, we established the provisions that is done by collegial cooperation. So when government adopts the provision 1035, then it will be implemented by the ministries. About nationalization, Russian occupation forces said that they want to create a mechanism to nationalize the facilities that belong to private Ukrainian, to persons, citizens of Ukraine. So what about new information? Yesterday we discussed 3 directions. One I discussed on the maritime law and the issues connected with the use of procedures in the framework of this convention and other international acts. And also we discussed the issues separately about inventory and assessment of state property that is in the territory of Crimea before occupation and is seized by the occupants and used by them, and also the implementation of international legislation to private companies, and there were some appeals from private companies. They followed the procedure. And there is a group created, not yesterday, it was created long before, and headed by the Deputy Minister Zarka. And there are representatives of different ministries, and this group works now. And yesterday there was general meeting, and they grouped the issues. These were issues were grouped, and they work now on these groups, and then the government will be informed about it. And a lot is connected with legal capabilities to prepare documents and to provide evidence. So property, assessment of this property, and there are recommendations of the Ministry of Justice. They were provided before, but for some reason they were not the procedures were not complete, how to assess, how to provide recommendations. And yesterday that we decided that we will return to these recommendations for state bodies and for private organizations. There will be mechanisms used. And also the issue of financing, you know, there is a priority. High-class lawyers and top professional economists, they need proper financing. And this issue was raised yesterday also. And the third issue I spoke about, so Naftogaz and Bank issues were considered separately as well. Thank you very much and goodbye.
До зустрічі. Не вимикав мікрофон, не знаю як там. Дві кнопки. Одна може катапультувати.